Hi everyone, it's svgcoop.com with another training video for you. And what I wanted to do today was take a look at this image that's on the bottom here. I recreated this in Illustrator, but whether you use Illustrator or Inkscape, this video is definitely something you want to take a look at. So one of our members was going to recreate this, but there's a lot of detail in here and a lot of small pieces, and so she was looking for a better way to create the file. So what I thought I would do is show you what I did to create the file and how it's different from the original, but different enough that you can still get the feel for the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this image up here and I'm going to zoom in a little. So the first thing I want to show you is Mickey's boot here. So you can see in the original image, if we just simply traced it, there would be a lot of very small brown pieces in his boot. And for somebody who's cutting this and trying to put it together, especially if you're using paper, that would be quite a job. So when I redrew it, you can see that when I drew the image, I did part of the outline of the tread, but this whole bottom piece of his shoe is a single piece. So that way, when somebody goes to cut it, I'm just going to move it out of the way for a second so you can see, when somebody goes to cut it, it's really only, his shoes are only 3 pieces. You've got the one boot here, the treads that are kind of cut, and the top part of his boot. But when I put it back over the black, it looks like the tread is there. Also, with his right boot, you can see this line here closes all the way. So you would normally have 2 pieces here, but again, I gave up a little bit of detail in order to make it easy to cut, and yet you still understand that that is, the part of his boot and this is the bottom, so it still works. The next piece I want to take a look at is his overalls. And although Mickey has some white buttons on his overalls, I decided that because if I tried to redraw this, number one, the blue pieces here would be way too small. This little piece here, way too small to cut. And even back here, just way too small to cut. So I decided to put little half circles here for his buttons instead. You can still tell that there's supposed to be buttons there. His pocket was big enough that I could leave it as a separate piece. So his overalls in the end are only 4 pieces. You have the little piece up here, his other strap, the bigger piece, and his inside pocket. Okay, next I want to take a look at his face. And on the original, you can see that Mickey's eye goes all the way up to his helmet on both eyes, which would leave you with this very small piece of flesh color to the left of his eye. And I try not to have those tiny pieces if I can avoid it, so I just made his eyes a little bit smaller. You can still obviously tell that they're his eyes, but now this flesh piece will cut as a single piece, and especially if you're cutting this with vinyl, it'll just cut perfectly. The next piece is his helmet. So if I just trace this helmet, you would get this tiny yellow piece here on the top. Down here you would get these tiny little pieces of yellow, and you see there's a little tiny bit of yellow in there. So what I did was I drew the outline of the helmet, but I didn't make the lines here go all the way up to the top. You can still get the feel for what the helmet is supposed to look like, and I drew these lines here sort of mimicking these squares, but not exactly. But when you zoom back out, you can tell it's a helmet. So it doesn't have to, you can lose a little bit of detail for cuttability. Okay, the next thing I want to look at is the toolbox. So the toolbox has a couple of nails, a screwdriver, and a hammer in it. What I decided to do is these little pieces in here, although they're really nice and it would have been nice to have them, they're so small. And if you made this image, if you cut this image, small enough to fit on a page, it's going to be really, really small. So I decided to forego these little pieces. And also in the screw, you can see there's a little line here and a little line there, and the line in between the screwdriver. So what I did was I just made the silver outline for the screws or the nails or whatever and the screwdriver. And then if you really want those little lines, you could just take a fine black marker and write over it and draw those lines in. But to cut it would have really been a challenge. So I sometimes, like I said, I lose detail in order to make something cuttable. Also, if you look at his glove, you can see he's got the rectangle here. I didn't cut out the whole rectangle because I wanted the glove to be a single piece. But again, when you zoom out, you still get the feel that it's, you know, the work glove versus his normal glove, and it worked out okay. All right, let's go over to Pluto and take a look at him. And first thing I did was when you look at Pluto's collar, let me just zoom in here for a second. All the way to the right here, you see Pluto's collar has this tiny, what would have been a tiny piece here, another piece in here, and the outer piece. So what I did was I drew the outline of the collar, and then I put a line not going all the way to the end, and again not going all the way to the end here, so his collar is actually a single piece. It's not 3 separate pieces. That again makes it so that it's more cuttable for someone when they're trying to do this file. Similarly with the lunchbox, you can see there would have been a couple of really small lines in here, and those would have been difficult to cut. So what I did was, at the base of the handles, I just kind of came in a little bit so that you could tell it's a handle connected to the lunchbox. And you don't have those tiny little pieces, but it's okay. People will understand what they're looking at. Okay. The final thing for Pluto, actually, I want to show you 2 more things. I'm just going to move this up a little. Come back over this way. I wanted you to see his paw. So his bottom paw here, the bottom of his pad, you can see they have the 3 little circles, and this piece would have been closed in, and his toe here would have also been closed in. So I decided not to close in his toe here, and instead of doing those circles, because again if I cut those out they would have been tiny and like trying to get the piece in here, I just did half circles again so you got the feel that there was a pad. I left his toe open, and you know, he looks fine. So then the final thing I did was his tail. And whenever you have like a Mickey tail or a Pluto tail or anybody's tail that's long and thin like this, I always make it a little bit thicker so that it will cut nicely, especially if you make the image smaller than what I designed it at, which you probably will because I usually make everything about 12 by 12. So I wanted to make it thick enough that when you cut it, it would cut nicely, except I also wanted it thin enough that you could tell it was supposed to be his tail. So I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to bring down the original image, and I just want to show you how really, even with less detail, you can still get the feel for the image, and it's still adorable. It doesn't have to be exact to what you're trying to recreate. It has to be really what you want, because you want the detail as much as you can get, but you also want it to be cuttable. So that's generally how I will do some of my more complicated images. You'll see that in a lot of my images, you'll see where I open up spaces where maybe the original didn't have that. But all right, well, I'm hoping this helps as you're creating, whether you're using Inkscape or Illustrator. It's the same concept. And we will be back with some more videos. Thanks for watching.